It's actually a 30-minute drive from where we're staying to base yard. Yeah. Hey, how's it going? Welcome back. So today we're going to go after what's formerly known as the Banshee squeal, and it happens most commonly to the Powerstroke 6.0s, 6.4s, and the 6.7s. Yeah, I've got the truck on, and we're going to listen for that Banshee squeal. You'll hear it, it sounds like a belt whining, but it's not coming from any of the belts, it's coming from the middle of the engine bay. And now before we dig into this, we're going to want to do a thorough inspection of the engine bay area where the noise is coming from. This noise is coming from the center of the engine, so we know it's around the turbo somewhere. So we're going to check all the air hoses, things up top, and just to be sure, all the air and boost hoses, just to be sure that there's no problems with these before we dig into the rest of the motor, because you don't want to waste your time with that. If we can find something up top that's easily fixable. And if you can't find anything, then we're going to go ahead and start to remove things, get them out of the way so that we can look for it. Now, there's no real way to find the Banshee squeal unless you start tearing things apart and you look for any gaskets or anything in that matter that have been separated from the parts they're touching. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and start tearing this apart. What I'm going to look for while I tear these things apart is maybe oil or soot, built up carbon that has blown out. We're really just looking for any type of boosted gasket that may be worn out. And I'm hoping I don't have to dig too far into this, but if we do, then well, so be it. So we're going to get started, and I'm just going to check your air cooler lines. Seems pretty tight. There is a bit of it being popped up here. Can't reach it with your hand, so I might have to take this off anyway. So let's do that. Just a side note, this truck has an EGR delete on it, so it's going to make it a crap ton easier to work on. If yours has an EGR delete on it, consider yourself lucky if this happens. Also, every 6.7 actually gets this problem with a Banshee squeal. You're going to get it eventually. Not to panic, because there are more videos like this one out there that show you exactly what to do to find it. Okay, we removed our degas lines and just threw them over here. Underneath your intake manifold, there is your pyro sensor, and it's clipped on to the intake manifold right here. So you're just going to get a screwdriver in here, or a pry bar, or a clip remover, and pull it out. Yeah, if you get a flathead right under here in that groove, it'll pop the spring up for you. You can pull it out. Remove the manifold end first. Just pull it back and pop it up, and then you can pull it out of this end. There you go. We're just gonna pull the map sensor out, the plug off. We're not gonna pull the sensor out, we're gonna pull the plug off only. There's actually one more dipstick bolt to remove right there. Also 8mm. There. You have to move this one over first, and then it holds the transmission line over to the right. And pop these air intake manifold bolts out. Yes, at this point we're going to go and drain the radiator. Pull this coolant line out. It's located on the passenger side, and there are two 8mm bolts holding it down. One here, pulled it out already, and then there's one down here, pulled out already. And then you just wiggle it free. Pop out your exhaust pressure sensor. That's this guy back here. And move that to the side and out of the way. The reason I do this is for the manifold bolts. Some of them are different sizes. I'm pretty sure there's only a couple of them that are different sizes on this, but I did this for the 6.0s, and I just adopted it for the 6/7 too, just to make sure all the bolts go back in the right place. This is off, and you need to check where the seals were and see if there's any blow-by anywhere. This one looks pretty good. Doesn't look like it blew out here. We know there's no blow-by here. The problem is going to be deeper, so we're going to go ahead and take off this lower air manifold, and then we're going to expose the turbo. Also, just bear with me because this truck is fairly lifted and I don't have a top creep. If you guys want to sponsor me a top creep, that would be awesome. So I'm just kind of leaning over, stepping on the tires and, you know, the bumper. So don't forget to disconnect your throttle body sensor. As the throttle body, your sensor is plugged into there, and that's that sensor. This one was already unplugged because of the DPF and EGR delete. So now I'm going to take these boots off, and there's only 3 mounting bolts holding the upper air intake, or the lower air intake on, and then these 2 boots. Before you lift it up and out, there is a sensor to disconnect, and it's right here. It's just a push sensor, pulls out, and then this can actually be disconnected from here, this little hose, or it can be disconnected from back here. It's just kind of like a vacuum. You just squeeze the sides in and it pops off. Now, once you pull the lower manifold off, there's going to be a gray twist tab, and you need to actually turn it counterclockwise, and then it's like a quick release. So once you turn it counterclockwise, it will allow you to pull this hose off. And but this one's giving me a little bit of trouble. So what I'm going to do is get a adjustable grip like this, make it about the size of the piece, and then rotate it over, you know, and then it'll rotate out, and then I can pull it off. That is what most Powerstrokes look like after 90,000 miles. It's kind of horrendous, but that's why we're doing all this. So we're just going to do a quick inspection here, and it does not look like this was the problem at all. Everything looks to be good. Doesn't look like there's any blow-by here whatsoever. So we got to go a little bit deeper, and I have a hunch it's going to be an exhaust component and not an intake component. To go deeper, we have to remove this cooler line, air cooler line, or the boost line. And there is an 11 here, and you just unthread it to the ends, but don't take it off. And then there is a clip here that pulls off. We're gonna use a flathead screwdriver, pry this clip. You see this in here? Watch as I pry this clip with my flathead. It's gonna put itself up in the plastic, just there. Now there's 2 of these we have to do, one here, and then there's one on the flip side. You do the same thing, and then it'll pull off. This boost pipe does seem to be leaking some oil, but I don't believe this is the cause of our whistle. But what I'm going to go ahead and do anyway is replace it, and then I'm going to dig into the engine further, just since we have it open, and make sure there's nothing else that looks like it's leaking. It's just a plastic seal that protects the clip that's holding this line in, and then I'm going to also do the same thing for the back end, and then I'm going to remove this vacuum line just with the pliers, and go ahead and do the same for my turbo back here. This line also has the same setup as this, so we're going to go ahead and do all that. And this little clip comes out of that fitting here. Be careful not to break it, and be careful not to lose it, so that you don't have to run to the auto parts store and get another one. Alright, probably the hardest part of this whole teardown is pulling off these exhaust clamps, because they're just so tight, it's hard to get to. What I had to do is remove this up pipe here. There's a pipe that goes in right here, and I had to take that off, which is 313 millimeter. And then there's another clamp down in there that I had to loosen. There it is. You see that little thing where the bolt's supposed to go, where it's missing? There's a bolt there. I pulled it off to loosen it up. Okay, so we got that off, And then I was able to get a mini pry bar. This is the best thing right here, mini pry. And I actually had to work behind the turbo where the clamp bolts on. You see this little, how this clamp is, where the screw is. Right in this section is where you first want to pry. So I had to get up and behind and pry that section off. And then yeah, so there is one more clamp that I pulled, and that's under your passenger fender well. You have to take the passenger fender well off, unfortunately, but it's that guy right there. Whoop. There we go. And I just popped it loose, and that clamp is pretty much loose. Okay, so we're gonna try not to cut this cooler line. So what I'm gonna do is pull this clamp off that's close to the turbo, and now that the turbo's free, I'm gonna slide the turbo back, pull this line free. So this cooler line that was here, after I knocked turbo loose, I pushed the turbo back a little bit and kind of faced it to a point where I could reach the clip that was in the coolant line that came down to here. And then I was able to get that clip off with a pick. Now the turbo's loose, I'm gonna go ahead and yank it. Finally. Something under this downpipe in the back, because it keeps getting in the way. So you see that's loose. I got it loose. I just put a roll of paper towels under it, and it should be good. Also, I loosened that downpipe just from the two holding bolts that are right behind this frame, and then that little nut there, which I showed in a previous time in this video. And we should actually be ready. I am finding it difficult to get it off the back stud, so I'm just gonna pry here a little bit and see if I can get the back to wiggle. When you first yank on it, it's gonna feel like it's stuck. It's because it is. So you really have to just shake on it, shake it loose, shake it free, and then it'll eventually come on out for you. All right, so it looks like we found our problem, and that right there is the bolts breaking. So we're gonna go get some new bolts and fasten this this exhaust manifold back on. So that's what happens with these trucks, is the exhaust manifold bolts start to back out, and I'm not sure why it does it. Heat cycles maybe, I don't know, but the heads break off like that, the tips of the bolts break off, and it's not very fun. Now I gotta order parts and wait forever for them to come in, and so, but at least we found it and we can fix it, and we found it early on. So I don't think this manifold is bad. If you find these later on, usually these things will warp, but I think I caught it at a good time. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull this guy off, and then extract those broken bolts there, and order me a new set and rethread these suckers. Now, before you start, some good tools to have on hand, is your 3/4, your 3/8. You're not really gonna need 1/2 inch unless you're only running a 1/2 inch gun or something. What really proved useful to me were an assortment of picks and the assortment of pry bars that I have. Those two things made the job a lot easier. If you don't have those, I wouldn't dive into this just yet. Maybe go get them. And that's it. Go nuts. And check my messages. All right, get out of here.